Okay, for this video then, we are going to be looking at paper 3, so Weimar and Nazi Germany, and we're specifically going to be focused on the interpretation questions. So in the exam, you have got question 3b, 3c, and then your final 60-mark question, which is 3d, that all focus on your interpretations. So it is a huge amount of your marks on this paper. Now, the key thing with these questions is that there are potentially 8 marks that you can get with just knowing this structure and just knowing how to answer this question. So we're going to start with the first 4-mark interpretation question, and what it would like you to do is give a main difference between the two interpretations. So all we are focusing on is what is the difference between those two interpretations. Okay, a really easy way of doing this is reading through both of those interpretations and then summarising what does it tell you in relation to the question. So this particular question is focusing on Nazi policies towards women. So interpretation 1, this talks a lot about Nazis attempting to drive women back into the home were not particularly successful. In fact, the number of women in all types of jobs increased, mainly due to the work opportunities created by the economic recovery. By 1936, more workers were needed in agriculture and industry in Germany, and by 1939, the shortage of workers was a serious problem. This led to more women returning to work. Overall, the Nazis took a cautious approach to the employment of women, and only a few women were actually forced out of jobs. So if we were to summarise that interpretation about what it tells us about Nazi policies towards women, we can sort of summary that policies weren't particularly successful, as not a lot of women were actually forced out of their jobs, and all types of jobs actually increased of women participating in them. Right? So really easily we can say that Nazi policies towards women were unsuccessful. Okay. Interpretation 2 then. So by contrast, it said that Hitler was very clear that women should bring up children at home while their husbands worked. Schools taught girls from a young age that all good German women should get married and have children. 800,000 couples accepted loans offered as part of the law for enforcement of the encouragement of marriage. Women were not expected to work in Nazi Germany. Within months of Hitler becoming to power, many female doctors and civil servants were sacked, followed by female teachers and lawyers. By 1939, very few women were in full-time work. So again, if we were to summarise that interpretation about what it tells us in regards to Nazi policies towards women, we know that Nazi policies were aimed at keeping women in that domestic role. This interpretation very much says that there were very few women in that full-time work, and therefore we can work out that Nazi policies towards women were successful. So just to summarise, so Nazi policies towards women were successful. Okay, so that is almost half of the work done there for this question. This question is worth 4 marks. So to get those 4 marks, we firstly need to say the difference between the two interpretations, which we've just done. The third and the fourth mark, then comes from a quote from each of those interpretations to support what you have worked out. Okay, so we're going to write an example answer together. So we can say that in interpretation 1, it tells us that Nazi policies towards women unsuccessful. Okay, so that would be our first mark. To get our second mark, we need a quote to support. We've highlighted some of these key things already, so we can use those as our evidence to support that. So we're not even going to introduce it. We can literally put quotation marks in, get the quote written in. So we can write only a few women were actually forced out of jobs. Okay, so that would be your second mark. So you've got 2 out of 4 marks there without knowing any contextual knowledge, and it's just how to answer the question. For your third mark, you are then just going to repeat that. So we're going to say, however, in interpretation 2, it tells us that Nazi policies towards women were successful. And then a quote to support. Again, we've already read it and highlighted, so we can say very few women were in full-time work. Okay, and that would be your 4 marks for that first interpretation question.